everything.
Ready to go when they.
Dave, you haven't left yet.
No, ma'am. Friday.
Friday. Oh, have a wonderful, wonderful time.
Friday.
Where are you going, Dave?
Norway. I'm sick of this hot weather. Yeah, all this sunshine is getting to me. All right, it is your time, Madam Chair.
Great. Okay, well, let's call the meeting to order. I will start out with roll call. Battle.
Here.
DeBenedetto.
Here.
Dye. Eder.
Here,
Mastel. Here. Okay. Now we have approval of minutes. We have 3 that we did not approve. I hope you all got them.
I have comments on the minutes.
Okay, should we do one at a time? How about the July 15th?
Okay, that was very strange. It had absolutely no content and then it said the next meeting was in June, so.
Oh, that's a typo, sorry.
We probably,
That was one where we just met and adjourned, basically.
yep,
And then went down and walked.
well,
Yeah.
but that was after we adjourned.
After we adjourned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Uh,
but
okay.
at least that last part with the next meeting being in June should be deleted, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes from July?
I'll move to.
As amended, yes.
As amended, yeah.
As amended.
Amended, okay, thank you. Second? Do we have a second? Yes,
Well, I put, if I can, second it. Whatever.
I think you can.
I can?
Okay.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion about the amended minutes from July? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye,
Opposed, same sign. Okay, July minutes passed. Thank you for that. September 9th minutes.
okay, I have a comment on that one.
Okay, great.
So section 4D was probably left there from a previous meeting because it talks about planning for the walkthrough and the visit in June.
Yes.
So that should be deleted. Sorry, Jeremy.
Sorry, I had quite the stack to
Yeah.
submit.
Kara, did you have an official motion on that one?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the minutes as amended.
Okay,
Second.
and we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you for that. And just to note that Marcy joined us, so thanks, Marcy. Sorry, Emily, no worries. Do you need an agenda?
I have one pulled up right here.
You got, okay, great. Okay, we're just going through the minutes. So, October 14th. Discussion.
Corrections on that.
Any corrections?
While we're at it.
A motion to approve October 14th minutes.
I so move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Awesome. The motion passes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our new business. Okay, so the first item is a letter of support for the Brewery Hill Pathway Project for Beartooth Trails. So Nick Gaddy emailed and asked if we would write a letter of support. And I mean, I feel like we already voiced our support through supporting financially, but how do you all feel about writing a letter of support? I think it would just be a general, like, we support this grant application. And I can.
Yeah, it's basically the city's issuing, entering as applying for a grant and just all of the supporting letters from official groups such as, you know, the Urban Renewal District, and yes, this fits right in, would be helpful.
Okay,
Totally reasonable, I like it.
so let's, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to, submit a letter of support for the Brewery Hill project, trail project.
On behalf of the agency.
Great. Okay. There's a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, or any discussion? Yes, sir.
Who's gonna write it? Was that in the motion?
I'll write it.
Okay.
No, it's just magic. It's just gonna come
Yeah,
up.
There's a
Yeah, AI. Oh, my God.
there's a template that Beartooth Trails has kind of put together, so you can just
Yeah.
glam onto that and.
It's like, oh, I didn't read, yes. Okay, so we have, so I will volunteer to write the letter. So we have, any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes, and I'll draft the letter, and I guess I'll just send it to Nick. Or do you have any preferences with that, Mayor? Or do we have the authority to just write a letter of support?
Yeah.
Okay,
And you'll ultimately be submitting it to the city, so
yeah.
if we have concerns, we'll
Yeah.
get hold of you.
You know where to get a hold of me. Okay, awesome. All right, Brad, you're up next. So Brad is here from the Red Lodge Area Community Foundation to present a concept of a plan for housing for school district employees within the district.
Yeah, so very basic, this is just the early discussions with the school on a possible model to try to get affordable housing in the Urban Renewal District for district employees. Like it said in the intro, what does it look like? It would require contribution in some form from the school, bundling the project and doing the development at the community foundation, and then some form of land lease in the Urban Renewal District on city-owned property. And through that 3 legs on the stool, we can get to a point where we would have 3 units that would be in the HUD affordable range. So that means approximately $1,200 to $1,300 a month in 2024 dollars. But there's a lot of variables that we need to pursue a little further before we go. And the specific location we're looking at is Site C from the 2022 Workforce Housing Study that the Community Foundation conducted. That's the City of Red Lodge vacant commercial lot, 1.1 acres, currently zoned P1. So the starting point between the 3 legs of the stool, the land lease, the foundation doing development, and a contribution from the school. The first question is the land environmentally suitable? So we've asked Beartooth RC&D if they had any history on previous environmental studies on the land, any phase 1s, they did not. So there have not been any environmental studies conducted on that lot. Can it be rezoned to residential? That's kind of our next question. And then how likely and what would be the terms of a public interest lease in order to facilitate those 3 units for school district employees? So the outline that we have right now for just basic planning purposes is 3 units that we think will cost approximately $300,000 per unit to develop. And that figure is closely tied to what our experienced costs were in the most recent affordable rental development in the Spires, where we did 4 units. Those came in at a little over $300,000 per unit. So with the developer that we are going to try to retain from Habitat for Humanity, that's the builder of those 4 affordable units. That builder is willing to stay on and be with us in this project if we can kind of get the timeline and everything laid out, budget and, you know, cost, schedule, performance, what would be the requirements of that builder. That builder is willing to stay with us for this. So our next steps, like I said, step 1, is it environmentally suitable? And then can it get rezoned? And then can we request a lease of that location? if it is environmentally suitable and it gets rezoned. If there's a long-term 30-year lease in the scenario that we're kind of looking at right here, we could get to that $1,200 per month or $1,200 to $1,300 per month rent for the district employee with a contribution from the school. The unknown variable being what we would ask from the TIF district, from tax increment financing. What would be the delta that we need to get to from the rent, the school's contribution, and the debt load we would take on to develop? That delta would be what we would ask for. Because our whole goal with this is to, through rents, the school contribution, and whatever we would ask from the TIF, would be to break even on the debt service, taxes, insurance, maintenance, vacancy periods, and any property management costs. So,
Do you want to share that at all for the discussion of the price point, or no?
Price point on where we think it would be?
Yeah, well.
Oh, yeah,
kind of
if you wanted to bring, that's more context of the different programs that are out there right now and where.
But it kind of
Where we
speaks
can
to
get.
the missing.
So this is something, just had a brief conversation with Mayor Westwood and kind of laying out the different programs that already exist. So to orient you to that slide, if you see a green box or arrows, those are ownership programs. If you see something in red, those are rental programs. I got a couple paper copies. That's kind of coming up. So what you see there is the LIHTC. So those are the low-income housing tax credits that there's been discussion, Brewery Hill, potentially the old hospital as a site that might be in play. Those programs typically target the 30 to 60% of area median income. So you can see where those household thresholds are. That wouldn't help the school district with the starting wage for a single house, for one person household. Wouldn't make sense. They wouldn't qualify for any of our LIHTC projects. You look at CDBG, that's the program I just described in the Spires, where we've built 4 affordable rentals that are at that HUD $1,200 to $1,300 a month plus utility range. That extends it out a little further to 80% of area median income. But if you have 2 teachers coming in, 2 young teachers as an example, or a teacher and the spouse works full-time somewhere else, that 2-person household will pop the 80% of AMI. But they will not, in a lot of instances, have enough income to qualify for a private mortgage. So you see the little yellow line, that's kind of your finish line to get to a house if you're in the ownership realm. $106,000 is a good back-of-the-envelope heuristic to use for what does it cost to get your foot in the door in the private home ownership market. And that's using last month's data off of Redfin for the median sales that we had in Red Lodge, a 20% down payment, a little over 6%, 30-year mortgage, and the industry standard, 34% of monthly income to service the mortgage. So we have some affordable home ownership programs that are available. That's the Habitat model, the USDA owner builder. You can see those income thresholds. Gets you covers just about anybody who wants to get to home ownership in that range, if they want to do the 500 hours of labor and all of the things that go into that program. And then the bottom, the Community Reinvestment Organization, that is something that will not really get going until 2025. Carbon County did opt into that program, but the application process and determining how that pool, that revolving fund gets distributed for the gap financing on mortgages, that hasn't been fully ironed out yet through the CRO. But that'll be another program there that you see extends all the way for up to 140% of area median income. But the number that'll be able to service is going to be very small, because the county's total pool to start that revolving fund is going to be approximately $700,000. So it'll help some. It'll be very, very effective for those that it does help, but it is not a systemic or a broad program that will be able to have a wide, until maybe 30 years down the road when the revolving fund has had 15 or 20 turns in there. Because the theory behind that one with the CRO is that up to 30% of the mortgage will be covered by the CRO, and then that equity will come back to the CRO at the point of sale. So where do we have that gap? We have a gap in the folks that come to town and they make above 80% of the area median income and they don't qualify to get into the private market for home ownership. And that would be exactly what we would be targeting here for the priority hires for the school district. At a very known level, 3 units, to prove or to do a proof of concept that we can do this. And if it turns into something that works, we would look for other favorable land locations to do that same cost share so that whatever entity had a defined need could have first right of refusal on those housing units. The benefit of this is that in CDBG and in LIHTC, you see those area median income requirements. Those are strictly governed programs when you get those grants to do your build. This setup that we're envisioning with the school district would be the school district is in control or first right of refusal on who would rent these units. So we wouldn't have the strict AMI turn away if you break it by 1%. So that's the broad concept in terms of who we'd be servicing, the scale and scope of the project, the location, if it's suitable. And that may not be the only location that we look at, but that's our starting location because it's already a public-owned piece of land that would be beneficial to get structures built. Because at the time that the structures go into the tax revenue pipeline, if we were to ask amount from the TIF district, you could scale out in today's dollars when you break even on getting your money back. Because right now that piece of land generates no income for the city or for the TIF.
Can you describe where that parcel is? I'm not familiar with the, what was it, S2 something?
So the 20, yeah, it was a P1 public use parcel C. So you have AY supply Kroll, and it's that bottom portion, maybe 0.6,
Okay.
0.7 of an acre.
Okay.
That's kind of where we're looking.
Okay. Where is that?
Kind of behind A1
So that's that
Yeah.
piece that's along Highway 212?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it would just be because it kind of has a landlocked portion in the middle that is not owned by the city. It would be the southern part of that, about 0.6, 0.7 acres.
We're going to be talking just by way of information. It turns out there are some options for how we make that land available for builders. I don't know if it'll fit this specifically. We'll have to look to our planner and our here am I showing here's the picture. Maybe that's 2. Let me zoom out a little bit, sorry. Is it this one?
Yeah, right, yeah,
Well,
the left,
hold on.
the south and west side of the bottom half right there.
Yeah, I'm trying to. But the owner is City of Red Lodge. These, by the way, would not be built with the LIHTC tax program. So you'll remember the earlier conversations we've had about when we were questioning Section 42 housing within the urban renewal district and expanding, not to go to, because that's on the agenda a little bit later. But Jeremy had raised the point that that type of housing is exempt from having taxes put on it, which means that it doesn't bring any money in.
Mm-hmm.
These are not exempt. So if they go in and basically do a commercial build on them, which may take away another mechanism that comes into discussion a little bit later, but then there's some revenue being added within that district that doesn't exist right now, because right now all it is free overflow parking.
So as I kind of understand what you're saying, Brad, was the kind of development that's being discussed on top of Brewery Hill, teachers' salaries are going to be too much in order to
In most scenarios.
fit into that. So that basically that low-income housing piece really doesn't address the need that we're kind of seeing in this gap for people that earn, or teachers-related salary. And would that kind of fit in with the healthcare worker
Yes,
as
it would
well,
be the same thing,
related
they would all,
to the hospital?
yeah, they'll all exceed it, so.
So,
It's mostly service, entry-level service industry will benefit greatly from a light tech development,
from the low
Yeah.
income.
but that's.
But
about
what's
where-
missing is that critical community service need that's relative to a sustainable school
Mhm.
and sustainable
Yes.
health infrastructure for the community. So I think that's important distinction to me anyway, because I understand the need for low-income housing, but even just as great of a need is filling that gap.
So I thought this graphic was really important for the story.
And you don't have teachers, you don't have healthcare workers, you don't have a sustainable community. It doesn't really matter whether you can provide housing for low income or not. If low income people can't access the schools and they can't access
Mhm.
healthcare. So I think as we talk about workforce housing, I think we need to think broadly in our concept that it's not just low income, it's that middle income of professionals and service workers that are really critical to a sustainable community.
And it seems like that, I mean, that's like a lot of folks in that sort of category are who have done the mutual self-help builds up
Mhm.
and aspires to, right? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you look at the mutual self-help on there being the smaller green arrows on the top,
mhm.
you know, family size of 1 to 4, up to 78,000, and then the family of 5 or more can make up to 104,000 a year and still qualify.
Cool.
But that is really the only program for people in that, and it doesn't happen at scale. It's 3 to 4 a year. And right now, we're still trying to identify the next location for where we're gonna do mutual self-help, and waiting for the freeze to thaw on federal funding, because right now we're paused on our USDA grant application for federal funding.
Oh, dear.
Does anybody else have any questions for Brad?
Curious with is the ownership model gonna be similar to the Habitat? So basically, the city will continue to own the land, it's not gonna be put into a
The
trust.
previous one we've had is land trust,
Right.
and that'll likely continue.
This is not an ownership, this is a rental model.
Oh, these will be purely.
So
rental.
these
Yeah.
will be strictly rental. Basically what they do is they commit an organization, in this case, the school board,
Okay.
but it could just as easily be the hospital, the county, the city,
Yep.
says, we're gonna pay you $600 a month to retain right of refusal on that unit. And those would be like 6-month leases or some sort of a thing that comes into that. And so if it's empty, they'll rent it out, but that person has a 6-month lease, and if they say, we have a school teacher that comes in, hey, good luck, then, but basically what that gives them is the ability to pay, basically, it would normally be $1,800 a month, now it's $1,200 a month. And they're basically just owning, they have the first right of refusal on the space. But what that does is that covers the cost of financing and getting a unit. And it does so in a way, if you're the county, if you're the city, if you're the school board, all of our workers are union-based. So I can't just give everybody an extra $600 because now I've got 300 of them that want it.
So I guess my train of thought is toward who owns it? Will it be the district?
The financing will be the foundation, so the foundation will own the structures.
Okay.
But if
Outsource
there's
management.
if there's any other entity that wants to take on losing a little bit of money every month, we would gladly hand off responsibility for barely breaking even or losing money
Okay, so the foundation will have the deeds to the structures.
to the structures.
Okay.
Under a setup where it'd be a 30-year agreement for the land with the city, and then a 30-year agreement with the right of refusal from the school district.
Just trying to think of how the property taxes would actually work on that, and whether it would and to what degree it might benefit the TIF.
Yeah.
You know, the foundation does, for example, rent out in, you know, the Roosevelt Center.
Mm-hmm.
And so to the extent that that's a for-profit kind of enterprise, then it's taxable. If it's not, then, you know, we're providing housing, so we are meeting the goals of the TIF, but we're not increasing the taxable value directly.
Would it not, if it breaks even, is that not a taxable structure?
What do you mean if it breaks even?
So this is this is not I
Oh, I see what you're saying.
the working understanding, as we've talked about this plan, is that this is taxable. So this is taking money into the TIF in the long run. So which part of this do you see that makes you say maybe it won't? Because they're breaking even, because it's the foundation and the foundation is a charitable?
Right, so there's portions of the foundation's property that is not taxable. So we just have to make sure.
So, but Roosevelt is, you said?
Roosevelt, parts of it are. Parts of it are.
Parts of the building are?
Yep. It's a percentage that's based on how much is actually, you know.
Anything
I
they
know.
rent is taxable?
Really glad you're on that.
So,
Anything they rent out to somebody else, is that taxable?
yeah, to the extent that it's like a business. So they're providing funding to the nonprofit, but it's not a nonprofit activity. So then it is taxable. So in this case, I don't know, it just depends on how it's.
Our assumption
Set
that
up.
in the planning was
That
that
it would be.
100% of these structures would have to be taxed.
Yeah.
Which is giving first right of refusal to an entity and
Yeah, yeah.
collecting rent.
Yep, and that makes sense. So, okay, I was just
No, that's,
developing that concept. So, yeah.
it's a new concept that I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so the three questions you have is this land environmentally suitable? Can it be rezoned? And can there be a lease from the city? So how do we answer those questions?
Like, we can.
Yeah,
Well, I
our-
know, like,
our
'cause
next-
I
our
don't
next
have an
step at
answer.
the foundation is trying to find the most economically viable way to do the environmental impact. So if there are other entities that are in that game and like to fund that for specifically these things,
Yeah.
that's what we're gonna explore. If there are none, it may come where we ask, hey, we found a vendor, it's $4,200, we'd like to split it with the TIF or ask for some type of TIF resources, because that determination will be valuable going forward in the urban renewal
Absolutely.
district. So
Yeah.
there's some asset there that you'll get out of the study.
Mhm.
The zoning from P1 to some type of residential zoning, I think that ask we could just do immediately and then figure out why it can or can't happen.
Yeah.
So we could start that down that track. And then the lease discussion, I think, is something that the city needs to, I guess, give us what the left and right limits are on those type of leases and how to go about asking.
Mhm.
Or we could do first volley and just ask, hey, here's a proposal,
Yeah.
is this, would you want to allow us to do this? Either way, I think we'd be
So
okay.
you guys are leading the charge on that, that's awesome. So I was
Yeah.
wondering if those are questions that we'd ask our planner, or contract planner, so.
There's, I mean, he's here, I don't know how many of those are, I'll let him determine if there's any of those he wants to speak to when we get to that point.
Something the city might consider is whether or not you'd want to just give that land to the organization and make the land taxable too. That might be a bigger benefit to the city to have that tax value.
I was thinking about
So
that too, like
there's-
what's the
there's
benefit
a-
of leasing?
Like I said, there's a section that we'll speak about
Mhm.
in a moment, because it comes into play on that other parcel, whether there's an advantage to adding it to the URD.
Right.
And it turns out there's an advantage in mechanisms that it opens up, as well as just whether it's taxable or not taxable. So there's a couple of different things there. What I don't know is, and I'll let Jeremy speak to that when we get to the deed restrictions, but, yeah, there's certain advantages as far as like if we've got to do environmentals on it. There's an advantage to the city still owning it, because we can get Beartooth RC&D funding and some other different choices, and there's kind of like the Rocky Fork Inn.
Yep.
None of that could be, it was basically the city that had access to those resources.
Okay, is there anything that we can do for you tonight, Brad, that?
No, this
can
was
help you?
more just to
Okay, awesome.
get the idea and
Yeah.
let let the city of the URD specifically be aware of exactly where we are in concept and discussion.
Cool.
So everybody's all aligned and
Yeah.
The only thing that I would add to it is, as we've sat down and we've talked about cost of construction, obviously a significant portion of that cost is the land acquisition. Is there a discussion, and this is, I think, the part that's probably most relevant to the URD as far as a recommendation, is the city's buy-in to this potentially more than just land? In other words, could we use URD funds to pay hookup fees? Could we use URD funds for part of the construction? If there's, you know, and now we're back to we wanted to, you guys have said you want to establish a baseline, and then we want to have it available to help with all, you know, with projects. But at the same time, if the projects are coming up earlier than anticipated. So I think that, to me, is probably, when you look at this group specifically, and correct me, Brad, if I'm wrong, but I think it's if it comes to a point that the city buy-in is more than just the land, is there potential for cash as well, and what would the terms and conditions be?
I think the hookups, mitigating those fees, definitely. Sure. I mean, that's been a model that other URDs have used, definitely.
Yeah.
As far as construction costs, maybe.
Well, like, isn't there like like landscaping and like external things? Streetscape, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
We talked about, sidewalks and gutters,
Yeah.
Yeah.
type of idea over there, and
Uh-huh.
connecting that area over to the school.
Yeah.
To the extent that it's eliminating blight and
Yeah.
improving walkability and network and all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's another option, which I don't know if it's allowed or not, but is if we could use TIF money as a loan, low interest loan, to help layer the expenses of the construction. So that we would be loaning the money, we would not be giving it for, say, 1 or 2% interest. Anyway, I don't know how illegal that is, but it's an option is looking into as something that we could contribute.
I want to say Missoula did something like that. I have to look into it. I don't remember. Yeah.
Okay.
So super excited about this, the idea, Brad, and Wednesday, we have a school board meeting, and we'll be discussing it with the whole board, because essentially it's just been a discussion, between a couple of us. But it's very exciting. We have a handful of people retiring coming up in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So, we're looking at bringing in exactly the young families, young teachers, first-year teachers, possibly that cannot live in this community. They have 5 teachers that commute from either Billings or Columbus. They go back and forth every day, which is.
The ones in Columbus right now are thrilled to be commuting.
Yeah. So the idea of like letting first-year teachers rent, as they're coming in and renting for a handful of years, the idea is they're not gonna be there permanently. They would move on and possibly move into the purchase type of, housing.
Yeah.
Tenure is 3 years in the school district, so they know they're permanent at 3 years, and it's they feel a little more comfortable buying the unit. So that's kind of where the thinking is too.
And it's my understanding that the school has had the experience where they've made offers to somebody that have ultimately been turned down because they weren't able to find acceptable housing.
Oh, yeah, multiple different ones. And the
And-
school district does not want to nor needs to be in the rental.
The real estate business, same as the city,
Or,
yeah.
And it's just not fair to our taxpayers to run a bond. We talked about that too, to handle the financing. So that, isn't quite an option either unless it really comes down to it.
Where would the 600 a month come from if it's not, I mean, ultimately it's coming from bond or taxes or
So
something?
that would be equal to just a little over 20,000 a year, and we, in our budgeting, John's got some ideas of pulling it out of our local, or it wouldn't come out of the general fund, it would come out of a different, budget line item. I haven't quite figured it out exactly, but it wouldn't be general fund money. We can't legally do that not, it's exactly it, we can't legally do that and not offer the same exact thing to every, school district employee. Not a teacherage, was that the term that John used? It's not a teacherage, it's a school district employee opportunity, so it could be anybody. It could be principal, it could be janitorial staff, it could be anybody. The teachers are the ones that are unionized, and so we have to pretty much stay away from saying it's a teacherage.
Great.
This is just kind of that rattling around, coming up with creative
Yeah.
ideas on
Yeah,
how do we address
exactly.
some of these things, so.
Very cool.
And then did they fill you in on kind of our status as the URD in terms of funds?
Approximately.
Okay, so by like the end of this year, we'll have, just under 300-ish thousand.
Yeah. And then that had also been verbalized as a minimum goal to have cash on hand to make available for great opportunities.
That was kind of our thought from our original letter of saying, hey, let a little build. I think we're at the point where, okay, by the end of this year, there's enough there to make a run at the project.
Okay, well, hopefully you can come back and update us, because sounds like you're gonna be on these questions pretty shortly, so we'll look forward to hearing more from you as this proceeds. And let us know what we can do to help.
My email is just brad@rlacf.org. If you have any questions, ideas, suggestions, anything, just shoot me an email.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
It's exciting.
This is super helpful. Do you want anything? No, it's yours. If anybody wants a paper copy of that slide.
Awesome.
You could have put an email address on that too, I'm just saying.
Well, I sent it to you, it was just a draft.
No,
idea.
I'm saying for everybody else. Oh, you can take that one over.
Okay.
Marcy didn't get one.
I do, I have.
Oh, I'm sorry, I lied. Thank you, Brad.
Okay, let's move on to our next agenda item, discuss and decide on applicants for open positions on agency board. So we maybe can't do that because the closing date for that is the 21st.
Well, and to be clear, you guys really don't have any say in that. That's,
So we recommend.
yeah, well, you can absolutely, if you would like to make recommendations. So what happened is, we heard that we had a couple of names that were available. We ran it. We got one application from one of those names in the time frame. One of them applied the next day or maybe 2 days later and said there. So having treachered down this trail already with the planning board, what we did is we reopened the position, because as soon as you say yes, then the next day somebody else puts in, and the next day somebody else puts in. It's like, no, we stepped on this landmine once. So what we did is we ran an extension on it. And when those come in, we'll go ahead. And to my knowledge, right now, we still just have the two.
Okay,
And that's what we have openings for is two.
so Thursday is the deadline, so.
Okay.
for
And
Wednesday.
I will, they are not going to be, I don't think, actually I don't have to be present at that meeting to do that, because it is Thursday is the deadline. So we'll look at it. So assuming we have those, then what we'll do is I can put it into, I can have it as an action item to approve the mayor's appointment of, and then go from there.
Okay,
And if I end up with any more, I'll reach out to one or two of you that I know I can get hold of and
Yeah.
see if there's input. I always try to get input wherever available.
great, so we might have a full slate. Okay, moving on to the next one, report from Red Lodge Contract Planner on exploration, the potential to expand urban renewal district to include additional parcels on top of Brewery Hill.
All right, so we have Jeremy on the phone right now. And actually, let me, Jeremy, I don't know if you want to, share your screen, or I've got your email that I can bring up, or you can just speak to the bullet points there, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Jeremy Fadness, contract planner with WWC Engineering for the city of Red Lodge. Dave sent me a couple of questions that he wanted me to address at tonight's meeting, just kind of general discussion points. The first point was just moving the boundaries of the district to include the parcels at the top of Brewery Hill. Basically, just kind of the process in order to amend the district. And then the second question was, is there a benefit to having low-income housing tax credit project in the district? So those are kind of the 2 points, I guess, I did some research on, and sent Dave an email kind of outlining my findings. On the first point, I think you guys, it sounds like you guys have been through this process before, but MCA requires that, urban renewal districts be set up based on an approved plan. And so that district boundaries have to be set up within that plan. And so my recommendation based on MCA requirements, and this is 7-15-4216 of MCA, is that the urban renewal plan would need to be revised to include any areas that you want to add to the district, right? So you would have to update the plan, though the plan would have to identify that or determine that those areas are blighted areas, and then designate them as appropriate for urban renewal projects. That has to be done by ordinance. So this body could start that process, update that plan, but ultimately the city council would have to be the final public hearing and adoption of an ordinance to update that plan. So I think, Dave, I answered that question. Is there any other questions on that, or before I go on?
I'll defer to Tara and Jeremy, but I think that's similar to the process that was done before. Did that question get relayed on appropriately, Tara? That
I
was
think
just kind
so.
of
Yeah.
confirmation.
So
Okay.
we can do it, it's legal.
Yeah, we can, city council can do it legally. This board can recommend to city council, we'd like you to, and here's why.
Mhm,
Which is a great lead-in for number 2.
mhm.
It seems like the one element would be in, kind of defining blight, or defining those new parcels as part of the overall blight solution. It sounded like, that was, part of the process. It would have to fit into the narrative of the overall district's elimination of blight.
And it is consecutive to that, which is, there was a big part of it, and it is a big field of sagebrush with other areas within there have also been included,
Yep, it's true.
so.
I'm not arguing it one way or the other. I'm
No,
just
no,
saying,
no.
like, I would want the narrative to really
Yeah.
encapsulate that and make that case in a, intelligently.
Yeah.
So it does sound like revising the plan or amending the plan is gonna take some thought in terms of why, and identifying, like you say, Jeremy, how does it fit in with the concept of blight, and does it fit in with the other goals and objectives of the URD?
Yeah, and I think once we start talking about that, it'll be, well, why not this parcel, why not this parcel? And once you start dialing that in, then we can shape our argument for it.
Mhm.
And then that kind of came up to the second question, which Jeremy, there was a point in time when we had talked about if something gets built in there, then it's taxable, much like the project that Brad was talking about. And Jeremy pointed out that the LIHTC programs that are basically government tax credits are not taxable, or at least not during that initial phase, they're not taxable. So they aren't contributing to the URD dollars in that. But one of the things that Jeremy, okay.
I think it'll depend on ownership, right? Too. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of low-income tax credit type projects that are private projects that just get tax credits to assist, but and then they're deed restricted, right, for they have to provide to low income housing. But the ownership of that is, I think, like the previous discussion, the ownership of that is it's privately owned, and they're charging rent for it. So I don't know. I think again, I think we might have to look into that a little bit more and see how that works. But if it's a public entity that owns, so if, for instance, like in Helena, we have Rocky Mountain Development Council, right? And they own, they're a nonprofit, governmentally run program that runs Section 8 housing within the city of Helena, right? So that is a tax exempt organization that owns that housing. I think those would be tax exempt. But we also work for private developers that build low income housing with low income tax credits that I don't know would be tax exempt. I think they would have to pay property taxes.
Well, there's definitely a spectrum. So like you said, the HUD houses would be completely exempt. But for example, the Spire houses are, you could argue, partially exempt because they have that deed restriction on the sale value. So the value is capped, but they are providing taxable value to the TIF. So there's, it does depend on the ownership, how that's set up. And yeah, there's a lot of details that go into it.
So, I mean, I think that's kind of, that's maybe getting into the weeds a little bit, but I guess the other thing I was going to bring up too that kind of goes along with the discussion that was had previously as far as leasing, selling, donating land. So MCA 715 4261 has very specific requirements for urban renewal districts where the land is publicly owned on how you can dispose of that property. And so if it's specifically used for low income housing, the city can donate or dispose of that at a reduced price. But so I think the question is, what is the definition of low income housing? Is it that 30 to 60% LMI range of housing is low income housing? So there might be some discussion into that. If you don't fall within that low income housing definition, then the city is required to dispose or lease of that property at fair market value. So that might be a discussion we need to have in relation to this school housing project. If that land is within the urban renewal district, right? Is how are we defining low income housing and how can the city actually dispose of that land? Whether it has to be fair market value, either lease or sale, or if it's actually defined as low income housing and the city could donate it.
Does the MCA define low income housing if they use that verbiage?
I didn't get into that much. I mean, I can certainly get an answer for you. I don't have it right in front of me.
Their biggest thing that they describe it is change property, blah, 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 but it talks about I found this earlier, how it does specifically say housing, but it is within the urban renewal district. So it's basically, it's an extra mechanism that's available. Disposal of municipal property in urban areas. And I could share it. I'm just not sure if it would be valuable. The version that I found is 2013, so it's not scalable. Let me see if I can, what's our latest, 2023?
I'm not sure what you're.
It found a 2013 version of MCA, and it was a PDF that I couldn't do.
Oh,
Um,
I'm just curious if, that's a hard, strictly defined MCA boundary, or if we can use our workforce housing definition that's in the urban.
No, it says urban renewal district, so it is tied to the boundary, but what I didn't see in there was a tie to they didn't say what, it just says a multi-family housing development operated by the corporation for low-income housing. No definition of, who meets the eligibility requirements of the corporation. So basically they set out their terms and it could be. Now, there are some spots that subject to restrictions of Article X, Section 6, so you got a couple of hot links you'd have to pursue down to validate, but that piece of information to me was, before when we were talking about, is it worth considering putting this in the URD, all the conversations were, well, we could give them money, but could we get money from them? And now suddenly it's, oh, here's a mechanism that's available to help promote that goal of the URD of affordable housing. There's some additional tools available if it's within the URD. And to me, I was like, ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, and if it's privately held, right? I mean, I think there's that property tax value, that taxable discussion too, right? So there might be a mechanism, depending on the project and ownership and those sorts of things, would have to be explored, but there'd be potential for some funds to be coming back into the district once developed as well. So I think it is I guess I kind of feel like it is a win, based on my research. I think it is a win-win kind of for the urban renewal to kind of pursue that, because you're promoting the affordable housing, low-income housing type aspect, but then there's also the potential to be bringing funds into the district for development of those properties that are vacant.
So what I heard was there's benefit of extending the URD boundary to incorporate those properties on top of Brewery Hill, because that opens up other avenues of funding that might be available to help achieve the goals of the URD. Not necessarily, so the benefit wasn't just to be able to tap into the TIF funds, but there's other benefits.
There's additional mechanisms for the city to help up in providing the land if it's within a URD boundary. Am I reading that and understanding that correctly, Jeremy?
Yes, I agree with that statement. Yeah, it looks to me like by having it in the URD boundary, it opens up, especially if it's specifically earmarked for low-income housing project. There's a mechanism in this MCA code that allows the city to donate, reduce prices for that land, to facilitate development of those projects. Where you wouldn't have to go, it doesn't look to me like you would really have to go out for like RFPs or anything like that for development of that project. If it's in the boundary and it's within your plan, basically, depending on the definition of low-income housing project, right? Which we would have to dive into a little bit more probably, but I think you can just work with those developers directly if it's in the district.
So at what point do we feel like this is a real enough potential project that we pull the trigger? Because there's costs in making these changes.
Help me understand the cost that you're identifying. I'm not arguing, I'm just saying, I just want to, because.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do it. So somebody that gets paid to do this is going to do it, and that costs money and time and.
So in other words, we pay somebody to adjust the boundary and then do an ordinance. Is there cost beyond that?
To revise the plan and determine blight and all that stuff. Yeah. No.
I think we'd be involved in revising the plan.
Well, I don't know that we would write it. I think
Yeah.
I don't have time to do it.
No, we're not writing it.
No, but you're providing the high-level direction that says, yo, lock that
Yes.
land in.
Well, and see what it makes, yeah.
Yes,
why it makes
but
sense.
we're not writing it. But it's taking some of our time too, but that's costing money too.
I think, unless somebody were to convince me of otherwise, I think that falls in the administrative of doing the business of the city, and I think we're probably all right. I would, before we do it, I would poll council and make sure that it's a venture worth doing. But if council's in favor of doing it, I don't think our cost is gonna be very high.
Right, yes, I didn't think.
There
it was very high,
are,
but,
there are
like,
higher costs when it comes to and by the way, this would be another potential for URD, is I know they're gonna have to have a survey to go in and do that. They've gotta have an official survey of that. That might be something that's like hookup fees, right? It's a cost of construction. Let's help make this land more approachable.
That was my question originally, was how can, if TIF funds were used for parts of this project, various aspects, whether it's hookup fees or survey boundary or whatever, if there's no return back into the TIF funds from increased valuation because the city still owns the land, and you know, that's, I think, another consideration to think about. If we continue to expend TIF funds, but there's no increase in value that's coming back to replace those funds, I think that's maybe something to keep in mind or think about as well, because it isn't just a fund to
achieve the goal.
give money out. There's an expectation that because of the increased valuation that development is going to have, it's going to contribute back to replenishing the funds that go out. So that's kind of my question or comment, I guess.
I'm not sure that link has to be that direct.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, it could be the fact that, hey, having a workforce that lives here, you know, contributes to the value of the TIF overall and, you know, the town in general.
yeah, I kind of agree with Jeremy. Like, I feel like if you follow that logic, then every single square inch of land in the, I mean, maybe not, but would have to be generating income. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if that was a goal, wouldn't it be written in the plan that the goal is housing is in there, but not sustaining the URD? Maybe it is.
It's
I don't
kind
know.
of implied in
Is it?
having the TIF, I guess. But,
Yeah,
you know, like, so if we did like sidewalks, you know, or the Brewery Hill thing, you know,
Yeah.
that doesn't provide direct taxable value at all.
sure.
But it would provide value potentially to the neighboring parcel,
Yeah.
the interconnected, you know, tourism value,
Yeah.
all that kind of.
No, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about if it was private property
Yeah.
and
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah,
so the private property is getting taxed already
Yeah.
at a value.
sure.
You put a structure on it, that's going to increase the
Yeah.
value.
Yeah.
But that increased value goes to the TIF fund,
Mm-hmm.
whereas if you have city-owned property and you have a building on it, really doesn't increase the value, so there's
So what's the point?
there's no.
There's not necessarily a correlation between the building and the land. So for instance, up at the airport, all of those hangars are individually owned and taxed, even though they're on leased land that's the city. So there are taxes that come from, what's the word I'm thinking of? Leasehold interest, is still taxable. So the structures, depending on a bunch of other variables, could still be taxable even if the city owns the land.
So in this case, where the city owns the land, developers build low-income housing, the value of that low-income housing is taxable.
I think depending on the program of where they get their money.
Okay.
If the Fed says, we'll give you the money, but the catch is it's not taxable, that would be so, and I think that requires some additional research, but it's also something that we get informed of, not a say in.
But,
Unless we want to pursue this option rather than that option.
but to
So my-
Tara's point before, the goals of the renewal district are not necessarily increasing the tax base. They're renewing the district.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
And so those are the primary goals. Not keeping
that-
it viable.
And that wasn't really what my concern was. My concern was you have a pot of money that's coming in because of the TIF funds, because of the increased valuation. It's the ability to maintain that pot of money to help
The next project.
to, yeah, the next project. That's where I'm coming from. I'm not saying that the URD's purpose is to increase the tax base. It's,
But compound interest, as it were, will help it further its cause.
it's maintaining that stream of available funds that could be used to achieve the goals of the URD. That's my question, I guess, more than anything else. And if that's not an issue, then that's fine, but.
It's something to keep in mind, like when James was on our board early on, you know, if we subdivide a large chunk, that immediately provides a lot more value to the TIF than just that one parcel did. So, you know, there's factors to consider, and we would lean one way or the other, maybe.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so we've had a good discussion on this topic. Is there any action that we want to take from here? Like, are we ready to pull the trigger and say, yes, we want to revise the plan, we wanted to, who's in charge of the?
We could recommend to council that they look at revising the plan to include additional parcels, to include that one, and, you know,
So then.
develop a rationale for such
Yeah.
a thing.
Right.
If they do that, and then maybe the community foundation or that developer changes their mind, maybe there'd be another it is seems like a great location for that, so maybe there'd be, I don't know, is there a downside to if we say do this and there's some cost, not huge, but, and then it doesn't happen, it's probably not a huge downside, I don't know.
I mean, if somebody just built the house on it and it had nothing to do with affordable anything,
Then
that
that's
taxable value would still go into the TIF, so that would be
Yeah.
an advantage.
What about the trading of that little weird piece in the middle of the island private?
We're working on that separately.
You are still,
Yeah.
but it's still proceeding, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so does somebody want to make a motion on it? Oh, maybe we can't because it's not, supposed to have it on the agenda next time. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe not, we could do a consensus since we don't have any power, since we're basically nothing.
Well, it is,
That is the council.
The mayor keeps reminding us that basically we have nothing
For
to do.
discussion, maybe.
But I think.
well, you have it,
It's not discuss and decide.
I don't know. Jeremy, do you have an opinion of if they can make a motion to make a recommendation with what they have on the agenda? Or do they need to have it as more of this agenda item said discuss and decide, does the agenda item need to say, make a recommendation to council and then have that on the agenda?
I mean, it's a report.
Yeah, I would probably, since it just says report from contract planner on expansion of urban rural district, it's just be on the safe side, I would say put it under new business for next meeting as a recommendation to city council to update urban renewal plan, to include additional parcels, and just leave it at that.
And particularly given the time of year, another month is not gonna.
Yeah,
We're doing this right, not yesterday, so.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay. Okay, super. Okay, well, we will have that on the agenda next month. And if I forget it, please somebody will amend. Okay, the last item, under old business is discuss City of Red Lodge's draft growth policy. So, do you want to lead us in a discussion?
Well, my point, I guess, with bringing this up was that just to provide the opportunity for Urban Renewal Agency to take a look at the draft or working draft of the growth policy, and I looked at it this afternoon, and I guess, one of the things that struck me when we went through the goals and objectives and action items early on, there's no mention in there in terms of the urban renewal district. And this might be a question for Jeremy as well, is that something that given the discussions that we just had earlier and the opportunities for to address workforce housing, I guess my question is that something that we needs to be inserted as a goal, objective, and action item, either under the housing section or under the land use sections of the growth policy.
Right.
The only thing that in the growth policy right now, under the land use section itself, is a paragraph that says that urban renewal district was created in the north entrance zone. And that's it. There's no goals, no objectives, no action items relative to implementing the urban renewal plan. So that's.
Well, I was kind of hoping our urban renewal plan would be,
An appendix?
included as an appendix, that's the bare minimum.
What would be included as an appendix, but
Also linked into the actual
does
plan.
we need to be more specificity referencing the plan? Number one, there's no reference in the growth policy to that appendix. And so that's kind of maybe a question for you, Jeremy, since you're on too. Is that something
I don't think it would hurt. I mean, I don't know that you need to get in real in depth with it in the growth policy. I mean, you could just make a real simple action item under housing, say, to, review and update urban renewal plan as appropriate to provide more opportunities for affordable housing, something like that. I mean, I think you could keep it really simple. Not having something in there in the growth policy isn't going to limit you in the future to do that work. So, I mean, it's not like if it's not in the growth policy, we can't do it. It's just a policy. So, like I said, I mean, it's kind of up to you guys. I mean, that wouldn't hurt anything to have some kind of a simple action item in there under housing for that, which we could do pretty easy.
And it does support future grant applications or something. We can say, yes, see, this is in our growth policy in addition to being in the urban renewal district.
Mhm. I think it would speak to the,
Integration.
the growth policy isn't our bailiwick, but it would speak to the completeness of this plan
Yeah,
if it included our urban renewal plan, I would say.
yeah.
Could it be referred to on page 33 where it talks about the urban renewal district as somebody suggested as a policy, and then it's appendicized, it's an appendix. And that way, if you change the policy, it would still be in there in its changed version. So you just refer to it as the entire document.
that's the way that the growth policy has addressed the other plans, is they just basically reference
Okay.
and then cite the location in the appendix. So
Okay.
like the parks plan or the active transportation plan, those are all, they're not embedded in the growth policy itself. They're referenced as part of the growth policy. So if the plans change, you don't have to go in and change the growth policy.
Right, right. That's the
That
power.
correct, James?
So if we change the urban renewal district and extend the boundaries, we don't have to redefine the growth policy.
No.
So are you our conduit for doing that? You would take that back to the planning committee? Or do you want us to
Well, I
do
could, or I guess the other piece, I mean, yeah, I could if that's the wish of this agent, of the board, if they want something a little bit more specific. And I guess the reference in that paragraph, or wherever that's appropriate within the growth policy, referencing the urban renewal district, I think is definitely a good idea. I guess the other section was just under the goals and objectives for housing, and maybe, just the way that's structured, say so there is a goal for provide housing options for all city residences, and then the objectives, there could add another objective for reference the urban renewal plan.
Can you
I'm
go
gonna
back?
kind of rely a little bit on you, Jeremy, if I'm kind of interpreting the structure, the way these goals, objectives, and action items are
Well,
structured in this.
Yeah, I mean,
protocol.
I think you already have a goal and or objective to, provide affordable housing or provide housing for all sectors of city residents, right? So I think it's just,
Right.
I think it's really just adding an action item to address that goal, which would, another action item, which would be to update the urban renewal plan to increase the district boundaries to provide more opportunities for affordable housing or something like that. I think it could be a really simple, just action plan item.
Joanne had it as something like continually look at or reevaluate or something. It was a.
Right. Yep, something like that, but I think just put it under I don't think we need to add another goal and objective because it already feeds into the goals and objectives we already have. It's just an action item to implement, another action item to help implement the housing goals and objectives.
Not to be pedantic, but there was something in that Jeff just read that hit me funny. It said, provide housing options for all city residents, and by definition, if they live here, they're a resident.
You are
So
a city
if
resident.
we don't provide it, then they're not a city resident, so bingo, we got that one 100% spot on right out of the gate.
Done. Second.
So maybe, for the housing, something other than resident maybe is the.
Mhm.
Well,
For the community.
it's necessarily gonna be circular. Any housing is going to be housing a resident, so. It's fine. I don't know. 'Cause
Okay.
who else are you providing
It's the
housing?
workforce for the city. It's not
Oh,
necessarily that they're already residents. They're a necessary component of a vibrant city is to have a vibrant workforce.
To address the housing needs,
There you go.
Yes,
and, that's a generic, and,
There you go.
because as soon as they're here, then they become residents, so.
that's right.
Something about just the housing needs or
I like that.
generic.
Not wants.
Boy, we're not editing this.
Right, yeah,
Well, I
right.
know, the planner might be, he's got it up in the background.
It's true.
But, yeah,
Just taking notes, that's fine.
yeah, I do. I think Jeremy was right, I'm not suggesting if we're not gonna add a goal, that's an additional goal or objective, I think the way it's currently worded is broad enough so that maybe the more important item is the action item to update the URD and implement. Because, keep in mind, the growth policy isn't really specific to providing workforce housing. It's for all the city residents or provide guidance for all the residents or residential areas within Red Lodge, so.
Okay. Is there anything else that we can do?
No, is that kind of the consensus to maybe add an action item in the growth policy? Is that what?
It sounds like it.
good.
Okay. That's to update the urban renewal plan and explore extending the URD district.
Ooh.
Right?
Don't, I'm trying not to to converse with the conversation, but.
I mean, I'm just trying to get,
Well, maybe Jeremy's the one that said that suggestion, so Claire, that's a Jeremy question. This Jeremy. Did you hear?
I think we can work, Jeff, we'll just work at the planning board level on the actual language for that item, if that's okay. I mean, I think it's,
Yeah.
again, I think it's just simple. I think it's just, we just keep it simple and, I don't think we need to make it complicated. So the simpler the better. Just simply,
so you can provide some wording suggestions.
correct. Yep.
Okay. Okay,
Let's get our appendix.
yeah,
Let's get our appendix.
okay, great, okay. Oh, if there's nothing else on that, then we'll move on. Okay, treasurer's report,
Nothing new.
nothing new. Any questions for the treasurer? Written correspondence, petitions, communication from the audience?
Is that before other business? I don't know if
No.
I'm correspondence from the audience or other business.
Well, next is other business.
Okay, I'll wait for that part.
Okay.
So that would be right now, because.
Okay, other business? Oh, okay, yes.
Madam Chair, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Cal Renner. Cal Renner has recently been hired as our Assistant City Planner. And so kind of the position that Courtney was originally hired into. So we still have our contract planner at this point for our certified planner needs, but we're working and training Cal up into that front desk planner position. So I'll be working with Brian. And one of the things that he will be doing here in the future is being the staff person contacted at these auxiliary meetings, so that we have somebody that can come here and can start to take on roles of minutes, and coordination for the agendas and all that. The email he's using is planning@City of Red Lodge, so it's the same email we've been using all along. He's just now the key point of contact answering that. And I'll give him a minute to introduce himself a little bit.
Yeah, so everything he said, and, besides that, yeah, name's Cal Renner. Recently graduated from, Rocky Mountain College. Yeah, then you kind of.
Lives in Laurel.
Yeah, I live in Laurel right now. It'd be nice it's actually nice to hear about some of this, housing stuff, because it'd be nice to go to Red Lodge. But.
Primary core hours are gonna be 8 to noon, Monday through Friday, and then coming back for the evening meetings initially. So somewhere between the 20 and 29 hour range, is what we've got in that. We've actually budgeted for 20, but we also are a few months behind. So, basically want to have him available when we have the resources that he can work with and learn from. So Brian works mornings, and then he'll be working with them, with the planner, et cetera, so.
Great, welcome.
Welcome.
Okay. Any other business? Okay, I think this might be our first or second longest meeting that we've ever had.
Pretty close.
Close to it. Okay, well, with that, I guess we'll adjourn. Our next meeting is, we have it set for, December 9th. Hearing no objections, we'll go with that. So, thanks, everybody. Good meeting. Thanks for joining us.
thank you.
Jeremy
Have a good night.
Thanks. Hi, Angela.